I am Rosemary Washington, 29, an office manager. 3 years ago, I watched my parents celebrate my twin sister Ava's bright future with a $100,000 startup fund. My father looked straight at me, Rosemary Washington, and said the words that shattered me, "You never finish anything." That night, I decided silence would be my loudest answer. Yesterday, Ava accidentally drove past my secret eco-flower farm and I heard her scream over the phone, "Dad, you need to see this. How did the quiet daughter turn a cold remark into a multi-acre revenge?" Please subscribe to the channel so we can continue to follow the memorable tragedies of today's story. Growing up in the affluent suburbs of Houston, my twin sister Ava and I were identical only in appearance. In the family dynamic, we had sharply defined roles. Ava was the investment. She was the shiny, high-risk venture, the one destined for celebrity, always needing the big check for the next big idea. I was simply the stable one, the safe, uninspired bank account. My parents poured every dollar, every compliment, and every ounce of enthusiasm into funding Ava's often failing projects. Ava's ambition was loud, attention-seeking, and financially dependent. Mine was quiet, consistent, and internal. My parents continually dismissed my steady achievements, my college scholarship, my consistent job. They labeled my quiet discipline as a lack of drive, my stability as being uninspired. They couldn't see the power in the slow burn. This constant dismissal led me to one powerful conclusion: if they won't value my hard work, they don't deserve to see it. My life as an office manager became the perfect camouflage. My coworkers saw me as disciplined, dependable, and slightly boring, the kind of woman who files reports meticulously and never calls in sick. This stability was my shield. While my parents and Ava were busy chasing grand, public dreams that always collapsed, I was quietly building capital. Every filed invoice, every saved dollar was a rejection of their chaotic, transactional life. My predictable routine was a radical act of rebellion, my paycheck, the only validation I truly needed. I secretly poured my savings into a small, remote plot of land outside Houston. My parents wouldn't have understood the appeal. They saw land as leverage or status, not potential. They viewed me as uninspired, but Rosemary knew what she was truly building, root by root, alone. This wasn't a reckless startup, it was a sanctuary. The land was the physical antithesis of their world, real, tangible, and solely mine. How far will a person go to build proof that the people who doubted them were fundamentally wrong? While my peers and family were chasing frantic corporate titles and fleeting investments, I found peace in the soil. Each weekend, I drove 2 quiet hours away from Houston's noise and my family's drama. The moment I stepped onto my small plot of land, the heavy armor of the stable employee fell away. Here, I wasn't an ATM or an anchor, I was just a woman with a spade and a dream. I started planting wildflowers, learning sustainable farming through relentless YouTube tutorials and local workshops. It was deeply therapeutic. My hands, usually glued to a keyboard, learned the honest work of the earth. I was building something real, root by root. This was my true startup, one funded by sweat, not shame. But what happens when your quiet healing becomes a loud, undeniable success that your family can no longer ignore? Even when I tentatively tried to share my growing passion, the mockery was immediate and brutal. My parents scoffed, "Farming? That's not a career, Rosemary. That's a hobby for the independently wealthy." Ava, ever the loyal mouthpiece, laughed into the phone, saying I was playing farmer and wasting my education on weeds. Their contempt was palpable. They couldn't compute the value of anything that didn't generate immediate, attention-grabbing income or social status. Their worldview was a cage, and my farm was outside the bars. But here's the essential truth about emotional abuse: it often provides the fuel. Every insult they hurled, every piece of financial help they withheld, became a seed in my heart, a quiet, burning promise to prove them wrong without uttering a single defensive word. I realized their mockery wasn't about me, It was about their need to maintain control and hierarchy. My silence wasn't fear, it was strategic. My farm wasn't revenge yet, it was preparation. But what happens when the silent preparation leads to a financial triumph that strips them of their favorite weapon, control? I worked late nights in the office, but my real work started when the clock hit 5. I saved every paycheck, funneling the money directly into my eco-farm project. I built the greenhouses by hand, learning to weld and assemble irrigation systems from online forums. Critically, I refused to borrow a single dollar from my family. Every nail hammered, every drop of sweat was proof of my self-sovereignty. I was literally building my freedom brick by brick, bloom by bloom. My family believed effort had to be visible and loud, like Ava's constant networking and pitching. But my greatest strength became my silence. No updates, no bragging, no vulnerability. I shielded my dream from their destructive opinions. They couldn't sabotage what they didn't know about. I understood that quiet effort compounds exponentially. But even the quietest success eventually makes a sound. How would they react when the money they dismissed suddenly became a trophy in my hand? The double standard was a constant, sharp pain. When Ava's $100,000 startup predictably failed, my parents praised her for having the courage to try. She got sympathy, emotional support, and the promise of a next big thing. But when my eco-flower farm, operating entirely on my own capital, won a prestigious local sustainability award, my parents didn't even bother to reply to the text with the photo. Not a congrats. Not a well done. My success was invisible because it didn't fit their narrative of my incompetence. The last message I ever kept from my father, before I archived the entire conversation, simply read, "It's not a real business, Rosemary. Get a real job." That was it. That final dismissal was the ultimate confirmation I needed. My silent work would remain hidden until it became too massive to ignore. The silence was now total, protective, and potent. I realized I wasn't waiting for their validation anymore. I was waiting for their shock. What do you do when the very thing your parents rejected becomes the undeniable key to your financial freedom? The double standard was a constant, sharp pain. When Ava's $100,000 startup predictably failed, my parents praised her for having the courage to try. She got sympathy, emotional support, and the promise of a next big thing. But when my eco-flower farm, operating entirely on my own capital, won a prestigious local sustainability award, my parents didn't even bother to reply to the text with the photo. Not a congrats. Not a well done. My success was invisible because it didn't fit their narrative of my incompetence. The last message I ever kept from my father, before I archived the entire conversation, simply read, "It's not a real business, Rosemary. Get a real job." That was it. That final dismissal was the ultimate confirmation I needed. My silent work would remain hidden until it became too massive to ignore. The silence was now total, protective, and potent. I realized I wasn't waiting for their validation anymore. I was waiting for their shock. What do you do when the very thing your parents rejected becomes the undeniable key to your financial freedom? I was finally ready to launch my full business plan. Ironically, the same week Ava was scrambling for new funding after her last venture tanked. The exposure came not from a business article, but from sheer accident. Ava was driving the back roads outside Houston and spotted a familiar truck parked near a sprawling property. She stopped. She saw the sign, Rosemary's Eco Blooms. That's when I heard her scream on the phone to my father, "Dad, you need to see this. Rosemary has built a kingdom of flowers." Within hours, the family caravan, my parents and Ava, arrived unannounced. The look on their faces was priceless. They expected a few sickly potted plants, not sprawling fields of vibrant color, sunflowers, lavender, and specialty roses, all professionally irrigated. They saw the solar-powered greenhouse humming softly under the Texas sun, a model of sustainability and efficiency. My father, the man who called me a failure, stood speechless. My years of silence had bloomed into undeniable, visible success. The question now wasn't what I had built, but what they would try to take. Ava's shock quickly curdled into resentment. Her eyes, identical to mine, widened in disbelief as she took in the scale of the operation. She ignored the beautiful flowers and focused on the betrayal of silence. "You've been hiding this from us? After everything we've done," she hissed. My mother, ever the pragmatic controller, quickly jumped into damage control mode, trying to calculate how they could benefit. The praise wasn't for me, it was a prelude to annexation. "Rosemary," my mother said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "we should co-own this. With our business expertise, it could be bigger, much bigger." She didn't see my hard work, she saw an undervalued asset she needed to manage. But I stayed perfectly calm, my posture firm, my eyes unshaken. I was standing on ground they never paid for. I had prepared for this moment of attempted takeover for 3 years. This was the battlefield, and my defense was simply to be present and silent. What happens when you deny a control freak family the one thing they crave the most? Access. My father, the ultimate patriarch, circled the property, his eyes no longer contemptuous but calculating. He walked past the rows of lavender, muttering figures, land value, potential yield, market rates. He wasn't seeing flowers, he was seeing dollar signs and a missed opportunity for control. The energy shifted from dismissal to aggressive evaluation. I watched him try to assign a monetary value to years of my quiet labor he deemed worthless. His immediate shift proved his love was purely conditional on my utility and success. He finally stopped, his face flushed. "This could have been a family business, Rosemary, a real family legacy, if you had just told us sooner. We could have helped you get an actual farm loan." His anger wasn't about the secrecy. It was about the loss of the narrative where I needed them. He genuinely believed I had robbed them of the opportunity to be my savior. He saw my independence as sabotage. They wanted ownership of the success, but none of the responsibility for the struggle. I finally broke my silence, but my voice was soft, not defensive. The confrontation wasn't between equals, it was between the builder and the critics. "If I had told you," I said, my gaze steady, "it would have never been mine. It would have been yours. You would have steered it, judged it, and ultimately killed it when it didn't meet your unrealistic definition of real business." I refused to apologize for my protective secrecy. My silence had been the single, most necessary ingredient for this farm to thrive. My simple honesty hit them like a physical wall. They couldn't argue with the reality of the thriving farm, so they attacked the method. Ava stepped forward, her face contorted. Ready to launch a torrent of emotional abuse, the old pattern. The temperature of the conflict was rising quickly. I knew this was the moment of truth, the moment I would either crumble back into the stable one or stand as the sovereign owner of my destiny. Could I withstand the emotional collapse they were about to trigger, or would I finally fight back with something more powerful than words? Ava couldn't stand the sight of my independent success, especially since her venture had just failed. She threw the ultimate card, "You made us look like fools, Rosemary. We supported your stability, and you turn around and do this without us? This is betrayal." The irony was suffocating. They equated my self-sufficiency with an act of war. They believed I owed them transparency, not because they cared, but because they felt entitled to capitalize on every part of my life. They demanded loyalty, but only offered scrutiny. My mother quickly followed suit, leveraging the guilt. "We just wanted the best for you. We sacrificed so much for both our girls, and this is how you repay us? You push us away?" The air thickened with old resentment, years of being unseen turning into visible anger and targeted manipulation. They were trying to pull me back into the emotional quicksand where I always apologized and conceded control. The only way they knew how to connect was through shared misery and financial dependence. I stood there, between the warm, silent glass of my greenhouse and the loud, cold anger of my family. I felt a profound sense of loneliness mixed with absolute liberation. This was the final battle against the ghost of my former self, the one who needed their approval. I recognized the patterns instantly, the accusations, the victimhood, the attempt to gaslight me into believing my achievement was actually a fault. But this time, the emotional warfare couldn't touch me. I had built an ethical firewall out of my own success. They escalated, throwing threats of lawsuits and family condemnation. It was an overwhelming wave of inherited misery designed to make me surrender the farm. But their volume was inversely proportional to my certainty. I knew every brick, every bloom was mine. I had the documents, they only had resentment. The fight was about ownership, not just of the land, but of my future. What was the one, unanswerable piece of evidence that I could deploy in this high-stakes family war to end their control forever? My father played his final, desperate card, the one he always used to crush my self-worth. He shouted, his voice echoing across my fields, "You can't handle this alone, Rosemary. You never finish anything. You'll run it into the ground, and we'll have to bail you out again." The words were the same, but the power was gone. He was desperately clinging to the old narrative, trying to talk the thriving reality out of existence. But the thriving reality, the thousands of blooms, the humming solar panels, was standing right behind me. I didn't raise my voice. I simply took a legal folder from my pocket, a slim, discreet piece of paperwork that felt heavier than a gold bar. I placed it calmly into my father's trembling hands. Then, I delivered my counterpunch, quiet and surgical. "Then why do you want a piece of something I supposedly can't manage?" That question, a perfect logical trap, silenced him instantly. He was forced to confront the hypocrisy of his entire argument. As his eyes frantically scanned the documents, the color drained from his face. Inside were undeniable facts, trademark papers for Rosemary's Eco Blooms. Signed, long-term supplier contracts with major florists. And most painfully for him, documentation showing every land purchase and development loan had been paid off. The farm wasn't a potential asset they could swoop in and seize, it was a legally sealed, debt-free fortress. My quiet defiance had become an ironclad contract. He dropped the folder, the papers scattering on the dry Texas soil. The power dynamic of 3 decades, his control, my neediness, collapsed in a single moment of absolute documentation. My mother and Ava stood frozen, recognizing the end of their era of leverage. This wasn't just a business, it was the formal declaration of my independence. I looked around my land, the proof of quiet persistence, and knew the victory was won, not with volume, but with finality. But how would I handle the final, desperate blow of their emotional retaliation? I let the silence hang heavy, savoring the moment their manipulative power dissolved. Then, I spoke, not to boast, but to define the terms of my victory. This isn't about the money. This is about the words you spoke 3 years ago, "You never finish anything." I spent those years proving that statement was a lie, not for your validation, but for my own peace. The money is just a side effect of the discipline you labeled as boring. My mother tried one last emotional plea, reaching for my arm. I took a deliberate step back. This farm is mine. Every dollar, every decision. You don't have a stake, a say, or an invitation. My boundaries are permanent, and they are protected by law and by my own iron will. You wanted to manage something big? Manage the consequences of your own contemptuous disregard for the quiet worker. Ava, for the first time, wasn't looking at me with jealousy, but with a flicker of genuine comprehension, a realization that my silent path had led to true freedom, while her loud, parent-funded projects led only to chronic dependency. I knew that realization would haunt her more than any lawsuit. She hadn't just lost a twin, she had lost her convenient foil, the stable one who made her look exciting. My ultimate revenge wasn't financial, it was existential. I didn't wait for a response. I turned my back on them, a symbolic and literal gesture of finality, and walked toward the sun-drenched greenhouse. They didn't speak again, they just climbed back into their car and drove away, leaving nothing but dust. The sound of their car disappearing down the dirt road was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard, the sound of silence, of self-made success, and of true closure. But did the family ever truly learn their lesson about the value of quiet ambition? The dust settled, and the silence returned, but this silence was different. It wasn't the silence of fear or submission, it was the quiet of victory. I walked the paths of my farm, feeling the soil beneath my feet. Every flower, every rustle of the leaves felt like a cheer for my persistence. The drama and noise of my family had been replaced by the honest, predictable rhythm of the earth. I had finally found my anchor. My family always preached that wealth was loud of flashy cars, big houses, public status. But I learned that true wealth is quiet. It's the peace that comes from self-reliance. It's the ability to say no without fearing financial backlash. It's the knowledge that everything you have, you earned entirely on your own terms. The farm wasn't a revenge weapon, it was a physical manifestation of my self-worth. I thought about my father's desperate, angry face and Ava's stunned silence. They were trapped in their cycle of needing to control others to feel powerful. My legal documents hadn't just secured my land, they had severed the emotional chain that bound me to their toxic cycle. I finally understood that my quietness hadn't been a defect, it was a superpower. It was the ability to observe, plan, and execute without giving away my hand. My revenge was complete. It wasn't about making them poor, it was about exposing their shallow values and reclaiming my identity from their dismissal. I was Rosemary Washington, not the uninspired daughter, but the owner of a thriving eco-business. My future was literally blooming before my eyes. My quiet life would continue, but now with a foundation so strong, no one could shake it. I know what you're thinking, did they ever try to contact me again? Did Ava ever apologize for her hostility and envy? The documents proved my independence, but they didn't deliver the true revenge, the moral victory. For that, I needed to expose their hypocrisy, not just to them, but to the universe. I held up a small, black USB stick. You think I was silent because I was afraid? No. I was silent because I was documenting. For years, I recorded our calls, your dismissive lectures, and every single financial request you made of me after labeling my work a joke. I stared directly at my father. Dad, this USB holds the audio where you told me my job was 4 losers just 1 week before you asked me to cover the payment on your company credit card. I shifted my gaze to my mother. Mom, it has the voicemail where you guilt-tripped me, claiming you sacrificed your career so Ava could travel for her big pitch. The shock on their faces was the mirror of their own ugly truth. They always thought I was too weak to fight back, they mistook my patience for powerlessness. Then, the final target, Ava. And for you, my dearest sister, this drive contains the documentation proving that every single cent of your startup money, the money you claimed was investor funding, was directly drawn from my parents' retirement fund and then secretly repaid by me using my boring paycheck. Her face went pale. I hadn't just revealed her dependency, I revealed her constant dishonesty. That was the real cost of their chaos, their integrity. You see, I continued, gesturing to the thriving farm around me, you operate only on transactions. You gave me conditional love and expected financial access in return. You expected me to be the stable daughter so you could siphon my resources later. Well, the transaction is closed. This farm is pure. It was built on sweat equity and quiet, honest ambition. The only thing you are entitled to is the memory of your own arrogance. I plugged the USB into a secure external drive and hit a single button. Everything on this drive, the audio, the emails, the financial records, is now securely backed up. If you attempt any legal action against me, or if you contact me or my business again, these documents go straight to a media outlet, along with proof of your past financial fraud and attempted extortion. The ultimatum was simple, quiet, and legally airtight. I wish you peace, I said, a final, unironic statement. But that peace will be found without me. Our story ends here. I didn't wait for the inevitable burst of rage or tears. I simply turned and walked away, not running, but walking with the steady, self-assured pace of a person who finally owns her own time and space. The best revenge is not an act, but a life well lived, a life they can never touch. I heard the car start, the engine sputtering with their frustration, and then the tires spitting gravel as they sped away. I didn't look back until the sound completely disappeared. The air immediately felt cleaner, lighter, purer. They had come to seize my success, but they left only with the bitter knowledge that they had created their own worst enemy, the daughter who quietly planned her entire escape. I turned to my farm, now fully bathed in the setting sun. My real family wasn't the people who just left, it was the ecosystem I had nourished, the community I had built. This land wasn't just a business, it was the ultimate, tangible proof that I was capable, worthy, and free. I realized the whole story wasn't about revenge, it was about self-discovery and survival. I know what you're thinking, did they ever try to contact me again? Did Ava ever apologize for her hostility and envy? Did the father, the patriarch, ever admit he was wrong about my ability to finish what I started? That kind of toxic pattern rarely dies easily. Stick around for the epilogue, because the fallout from this quiet victory was louder than any of us expected. The day after the confrontation, the farm felt fundamentally different. It was the air itself, clean, unburdened by judgment. I realized how much mental bandwidth I had unconsciously dedicated to managing their expectations and bracing for their criticism. Now, that energy was purely mine. I could water the lavender, fix the drip system, or simply sit and watch the sunset without mentally rehearsing a defense. The exhaustion was gone, replaced by the profound lightness of being truly, irrevocably alone. For years, the silence I cultivated was a tactic, a shield. Now, it was a safe haven. There was no one here to misinterpret my quiet focus as disinterest or incompetence. My thoughts could simply be. I started to consciously reject the negative labels they had successfully applied to me, the stable one, the boring one, the backup plan. I was the owner of my life, the master of my silence. It took a dramatic confrontation to cut the cord, but the true healing happened in the stillness afterward. The last thing to go was the faint, persistent throb of guilt, the fear that I should have sacrificed my happiness for their comfort. I actively reminded myself that my self-preservation was not selfishness, it was required. I permanently blocked their numbers. This action felt like the true, final step of the revenge, denying them the possibility of future emotional leverage. The farm was my fortress, the block button was the final lock on the gate. But did I ever hear from them, or about them, again? 3 months of absolute silence passed. Then, the inevitable crack in their fortress appeared, not in the form of a hostile phone call, but a fleeting headline on a financial news channel. My father's small, heavily leveraged investment firm had been exposed for risky trading and fraudulent misstatements. The firm was collapsing. I felt a pang, not of sympathy, but of chilling vindication. Their foundation, built on noise and shaky ethics, was finally crumbling. Ava, predictably, was spiraling publicly. Her social media, once a platform for her investor networking, became a frantic string of cryptic posts about unforeseen financial betrayal and legacy loss. She was searching for a new savior. I scrolled past her pleas, recognizing the pattern. When faced with real failure, they always looked for an external source to blame and an internal source to exploit. Their performance of success was finally running out of budget. The block on my phone was impenetrable, so they resorted to the old ways. One morning, I found a heavy, hand-addressed envelope in my mailbox. The handwriting was my father's, shaky, desperate. The man who had called my life a failure was now reduced to writing an unsolicited, non-refundable letter. This wasn't a birthday card, it was the formal surrender I had waited 3 years for. The paper felt like a relic from a battle I had already won. The letter was a masterwork of self-pity and minimal accountability. It spoke of market fluctuations and misguided trust. He avoided using the word sorry, but the subtext screamed it. Then came the plea. He needed a bridge loan against my farm's assets to restructure his life. He was literally asking for a mortgage on the independence he had scorned. He was still operating in the belief that my success was a resource, not a boundary. For a fleeting second, the old pattern tugged. The stable one who fixed everything for everyone felt a pull of obligation. If I helped, I could be the hero, the savior, the daughter they finally approved of. But then I saw the truth. Helping them would mean destroying the debt-free fortress I had built, and collapsing my hard-won peace. Their chaos was their choice, my peace was my necessity. I took the letter to my outdoor fire pit, crumpled it up, and watched the paper turn instantly to ash. That was my answer. No phone call, no email, no lawyer. Just final, quiet action. The man who taught me to fear failure was now facing his own financial collapse alone. The greatest gift I gave them was the gift of my absence. The true consequence of their actions. I walked back inside and started planning my next flower shipment. Months later, the news confirmed my father's downfall. His firm was liquidated, and the house was sold. Ava vanished from social media, her entrepreneur title a distant joke. Their legacy, once so loud and imposing, dissolved into quiet obscurity. I had won the revenge not by defeating them in their world of noise, but by building my own world of quiet, self-sustained excellence. They sought to control my future, they only ended up forfeiting their own. The ultimate lesson? Don't tell them your plans. Show them your results. Your silence is not a sign of fear, it is the sound of preparation. The best revenge story is the one where you are the narrator, the hero, and the beneficiary, and the villains are only mentioned in passing. And my epilogue proves that sometimes, the quietest revenge is the most devastating. Was my father's downfall truly the end, or did I discover one final, shocking secret hiding in their chaos? I often think about the word revenge. It sounds bitter, dramatic, and loud, everything I am not. But my revenge was never about inflicting pain on them. It was about surgically removing their influence from my life. It was about establishing my sovereignty. The true act of getting even was simply living better, living my life, so wholly and completely that their existence became irrelevant. Revenge wasn't a punishment for them, it was a liberation for me. I also reached a point of profound, almost cold, understanding about my family. They weren't just malicious, they were trapped. Trapped in a cycle of needing external validation and financial performance to mask their own deep insecurities. They failed me, but they also failed themselves long ago. Seeing their collapse wasn't satisfying in a cruel way, it was confirmation that my escape was mandatory for survival. The toxicity they projected onto me was just the projection of their own self-hatred. My hands, once symbols of my boring labor, were now the tools of my freedom. They built this, they sustained this, and they protected me. I no longer needed their labels or their approval. I am Rosemary Washington, the quiet one who finished the job, the stable one who found true security in dirt and diligence. My peace wasn't given, it was grown, cultivated with the same care I give my lavender. This farm is my final, unshakable testimony. If you're hiding your success, building your empire in silence because the noise of judgment is too loud, I see you. You don't need permission to thrive. You don't need their applause to be worthy. Use the quiet, the dismissal, the doubt as fuel. Go build your debt-free fortress. Because when the dust settles, the greatest revenge is finding genuine peace on your own terms. Do you know what happens when you finally break free from the toxic cycle, and they try to come crawling back? The direct contact had stopped, but the toxic pattern was desperate. A few weeks after I burned the letter, an email popped up in my business inbox, not from them, but from a distant, well-meaning cousin. The subject line, regarding your parents' situation. They were using a flying monkey. The message was subtle: your mother is ill. Can you just call them? The goal wasn't financial, it was to breach the emotional wall I had built. They used shared family history as a lever for guilt. I didn't engage with the emotional content. I drafted a professional, clinical response: thank you for the update. Due to ongoing legal matters, all communication must be directed to my attorney. I didn't have an attorney actively involved anymore, but the mere mention of legal protection was the boundary they respected. I met their emotional blackmail with cold, bureaucratic efficiency. The cousin never replied. The final flicker of hope for emotional access was extinguished. The victory wasn't just financial or legal, it was the ability to maintain my silence in the face of their most desperate manipulation. My peace was my collateral. Their noise was their weakness. I learned that you don't need to shout to be heard, you just need to own the space you occupy. They measured success by applause, I measured it by the quiet, uninterrupted growth of my plants. I never saw Ava again, but I did receive one final artifact. A highly respected journalist contacted me, asking for a comment on a tell-all book Ava was supposedly writing about the family's betrayal of her brilliance. It was her last attempt at self-aggrandizement and external validation. I didn't comment. I gave the journalist the USB drive. Ava's story died the moment she realized I had documented her victimhood for years. The revenge wasn't the downfall of my family, it was my decision to build a life so beautiful and so financially impregnable that their tragedy became a footnote, irrelevant to my narrative. My revenge was finding happiness without needing their misery to justify it. The greatest rebellion against a toxic family is living a stable, fulfilling life without their input or permission. I closed the chapter on the Washington drama and opened the chapter on Rosemary's eco blooms. If my story taught you anything, I hope it's this: your quiet work is your loudest argument. Thank you for listening to my journey from the quiet, underestimated daughter to the owner of my own destiny. If this resonated, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, what quiet fortress are you building to finally claim your peace? Even after the silence, the legal walls, and the distance, the drama wasn't entirely over. Toxic patterns don't die, they mutate. I occasionally revisited the old communications, the condescending emails, the notes, the sheer volume of their advice. It was a necessary reminder of why I left. I had to ensure the emotional scars they left didn't fester into doubt. The quiet success of my farm had given them a new target for their failure, me. I began to hear whispers through mutual acquaintances, the narrative my parents were spinning. It wasn't, we made bad choices and were arrogant. It was, Rosemary was selfish. She had the resources to save the family business but chose her petty flowers instead. They framed my self-reliance as an act of calculated malice, transforming my victory into their victimhood. They couldn't accept responsibility, so they manufactured a villain. Ava was the loudest voice in this chorus of blame. She claimed I purposefully ruined the family's image to make her look bad. Her entire identity was wrapped up in being the favored, brilliant one. When the finances crumbled, so did her sense of self. Without my stability to contrast with her chaos, she had nothing. Her blame wasn't hate, it was the final, desperate struggle of a person losing their entire self-concept. My father, having lost everything, never once acknowledged his own failed gambles or the toxic culture he fostered. He saw the USB drive and the legal threats as a betrayal, not a natural outcome. His final act was not to apologize, but to double down on the victimhood. He proved that the true failure wasn't the loss of money, but the absolute refusal to learn or grow. That realization was the sharpest pang of sadness, the loss of the parent I'd always hoped he'd become. I had always carried a small, secret hope that one day, my success would prove my worth, and they would see me clearly. But their reaction to my freedom taught me the final, necessary lesson: they were structurally incapable of seeing me. Their ability to project blame was stronger than their capacity for reflection. The true ending wasn't when they drove away, it was when I finally accepted that they would never change. My life, meanwhile, was flourishing. I hired a business mentor who saw my quiet diligence as a strength, not a flaw. I started teaching small classes on sustainable farming. I built new relationships that were reciprocal, healthy, and entirely non-transactional. The noise of their blame was just the sound of my old life collapsing. The silence was the sound of my new world taking root. I was finally truly safe. I took one final legal measure, a formal, irrevocable cease and desist letter delivered through my attorney, not just to my parents, but to their wider network of friends who carried their narrative. It stated clearly that any further attempt to defame me would be met with immediate legal action and the release of the documented truth. It was the final, non-negotiable wall of my self-made fortress. The silence that followed was truly absolute. So, they lost their money, their status, and their daughter, but they never lost their sense of entitlement. That's the most disturbing part of the family revenge story. But what about Ava? Did she ever truly get out from under their shadow, or did she find a new family to manipulate? And what about the shocking truth of the one family treasure that I quietly kept, proving my father wasn't the master financier he pretended to be? The noise they made in their downfall was a pathetic whimper compared to the roaring silence of my peace. Remember this: the moment you choose your sanity over their drama is the moment you win. It's the moment the villain's story becomes entirely separate from yours. If you enjoyed the ultimate quiet revenge story, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because the next story might be even more shocking. The contrast between the old life and the new was starkest at the farmer's market. Back then, I used to cringe, imagining my mother criticizing my clothes or my father questioning my profit margin. Now, I was surrounded by genuine appreciation. When customers told me my lavender was the best, it wasn't just a compliment, it was a quiet, direct validation of my choices. Their voices were the antidote to the poison of my past. I found a new kind of family here, one not bound by blood, but by shared values and respect. My mentor, old Mr. Jenkins, never once criticized my decision to leave my biological family. He just quietly taught me how to stabilize my soil and my business. He never demanded anything but honesty. It was the first time I realized true, unconditional support wasn't a fairy tale, it was a choice I could make. My quietness had always been weaponized against me, interpreted as shyness or lack of ambition. But as I confidently told my customers the story of the farm, not the drama, but the diligence, I was taking back the narrative. I found my voice, not in anger, but in factual pride. I was demonstrating that quiet action speaks louder than any performance. The love for my work was the truth that silenced all their old lies. The biggest test of my emotional recovery wasn't the day I said no, it was the days that followed. It was the ability to keep saying no to the temptation to peak, to worry, or to feel responsible for their collapse. The voices of support from my community grounded me, reminding me that the only people who deserve my energy are those who replenish it. I traded a toxic history for a hopeful future, and the price was non-negotiable. I mentioned a family treasure. Well, it wasn't gold or jewels. It was something my father had hidden years ago, a crucial document that confirmed his biggest fraud was related to the initial seed money for the farm. I kept it quiet because its exposure would have ruined the family before I was ready. I wasn't just planning my escape, I had the hidden evidence to bring down his entire house of cards when the time was right. So, I held the real power the whole time. My silence was the ultimate weapon, and my self-reliance was the ultimate revenge. The story of my quiet victory ends here, in this beautiful, debt-free space, surrounded by people who lift me up. But how exactly did I finally use that single hidden key to lock them out forever? And what became of the vengeful sister, Ava? My new balance sheet looked nothing like the highly leveraged, high-stress numbers my father chased. My success was slow, stable, and entirely organic. Every dollar earned felt solid. I wasn't rich in their sense, no yachts or luxury apartments, but I was financially impregnable. No debt, low overhead, and a product that literally grew from the earth I owned. I traded the volatility of performance for the bedrock of genuine self-sustainability. They taught me wealth was about what you acquired. I learned it's about what you don't need. I needed no external approval, no expensive defense against criticism, and no performance to prove my worth. My wealth was the scent of lavender at sunset, the silence of my home, and the knowledge that every choice I made was for me. I found the true luxury in independence and the quiet abundance of a life lived authentically. I journaled often. I had to acknowledge that the journey wasn't without scars. The years of emotional warfare left a legacy of hypervigilance, an impulse to always prepare for the worst. That's the residue of a toxic family. But now, I directed that energy into planning, not defense. I became meticulous about my soil, my supply chain, and my personal boundaries. I transformed my inherited trauma response into my most powerful business strength. My perfect day is simple. It starts with the sun hitting the greenhouse, a quiet cup of coffee, and reading the paper without dread. There are no frantic emails from Ava, no phone calls demanding money. Just the work, the quiet, and the self-respect. It's the kind of stability my old family mocked, but it's the only true foundation. I built a life that is boring in the best possible way, predictable, peaceful, and mine. Did I forgive them? No. Forgiveness implies they acknowledged their harm and sought reconciliation, which they never did. Instead, I achieved something much better, detachment. I released them from my future. Their story is over, mine is just beginning. I don't need to carry their emotional weight, nor do I need to hold on to the bitterness. The revenge was complete the moment their existence stopped dictating my happiness. I now share my knowledge, and my students see me as a success story, not because I made a quick fortune, but because I built something real out of nothing, fueled by resilience. That, to me, is the ultimate win. I am teaching others to build their own quiet fortresses. My success isn't measured by the envy of my family, it's measured by the empowerment of my community. The sun sets on the Washington drama, but it rises every day on my farm. The future isn't about grand gestures or big revelations. It's about consistency, peace, and the freedom to define my own worth. I have everything I need, and the absence of their judgment is the greatest fortune of all. I am the stable one, and that stability is the most beautiful weapon I ever wielded. So, what's the final score? They lost everything, and I gained everything, but the victory was internal. Remember that. And what about that single hidden key I mentioned? The one that exposed my father's deepest secret and solidified my untouchable status? Did I ever tell the authorities the full truth about the seed money? Or did I simply let them self-destruct? People often confuse distance with coldness, especially when it comes to family. But my distance wasn't punitive, it was prophylactic. It was a clear, honest statement: I am not safe in your presence, and my well-being takes precedence over your comfort. This farm's fence line, which I walk every day, isn't just a physical barrier, it's the physical manifestation of my self-respect. Setting boundaries is the final act of kindness to yourself when dealing with chronic toxicity. Did I feel lonely? Never. I was finally alone, and there is a massive difference. Loneliness is the pain of being alone, solitude is the glory of it. Before, I was lonely even when surrounded by them, craving acceptance that would never come. Now, the quiet here is a comforting companion. The solitude nourishes me, allowing me to hear my own thoughts, unedited and unjudged. I traded their chaotic presence for genuine, life-affirming peace. The distance didn't just protect me from them, it surprisingly brought back people I thought I'd lost. Friends and extended family who had also been hurt by my parents' behavior suddenly felt safe reaching out. They recognized my actions as courage, not abandonment. The simple act of prioritizing my well-being became an unexpected beacon for others seeking their own freedom. My honesty created a space for theirs. With their power gone, I consciously broke the cycle. I ensured that the legacy I was building, my farm, my business model, my relationships, was entirely free of their toxicity. I will never use guilt as leverage, nor will I demand that anyone sacrifice their sanity for my success. My greatest achievement isn't the lavender business, it's the fact that the Washington dysfunction dies with me. I no longer had to perform. No more elaborate outfits for family dinners that were actually status competitions. No more rehearsing small talk to sound smart enough. I wear dirt in comfort. I speak truthfully. The freedom from the need to impress them was heavier than any financial burden they ever put on me. When the audience leaves, the true self can finally breathe. They always defined me by my perceived lack of ambition. Now, I define myself. I am the creator of my environment, the owner of my narrative, and the architect of my peace. My success is purely self-made, a result of quiet work, not inherited opportunity or manipulated connection. I didn't win their game, I dismantled the board and started a better one. So, what's the final lesson in my quiet revenge story? It's simple: stop engaging. Don't waste energy on people who thrive on your reaction. Your life is the most powerful rebuttal. When you are truly free, their downfall becomes nothing more than a historical footnote. My honest distance was the greatest love letter I ever wrote, to myself. Now, let's talk about the key. That secret document I kept, the one detailing my father's fraud. Did I just sit on it? No. I used it to protect my farm. But it led to a final revelation, a dark secret about the true owner of the original seed money. Was the whole Washington family fortune built on a lie that even I didn't see coming? I mentioned the key, the one I kept. It didn't open a bank vault or a safety deposit box. It opened this. This isn't just a box, it's the archive of my family's deepest, darkest financial secret. The document detailing my father's fraud was only the cover page. The real story was the source of the initial capital that built the Washington Empire. And the truth was so much bigger, so much dirtier than the petty theft they'd accused me of. The seed money didn't come from my father's brilliance or risk-taking. It was a massive inheritance stolen from his own estranged aunt, a woman who died tragically and intended for her funds to go to charity, and her only living heir, the quiet side of the family. My father, with my mother's full knowledge, successfully suppressed the real will and established their fortune on that foundational lie. The whole empire was built on a death and a forgery. This wasn't just greed, this was criminal. And it meant every condescending word, every demand, every act of judgment they leveled at me was paid for with stolen money. The core belief that they were superior to me, the dull one, was a lie built on theft. They were thieves playing at royalty. That truth erased any lingering doubt about my choices. I realized my revenge was just correcting a massive, decades-old injustice. Now, the question: did I use this final, devastating truth? Did I turn the papers over to the authorities, ensuring their complete, criminal ruin? It was tempting. But exposing the truth would have dragged me back into the drama, requiring months, possibly years, of legal battles and media circus. I chose peace over perfection. I realized the greatest power wasn't destroying them, it was simply knowing the truth and walking away. And Ava? Without the family safety net, her brilliance failed to materialize into stable income. She eventually moved to another city, clinging to the same narcissistic narrative. She now works a series of low-paying jobs, always blaming a vast conspiracy for her lack of success. She didn't find freedom, she simply changed stages for her continuous victim performance. The greatest irony is that she is still trapped, not by me, but by her own character. My new chapter isn't defined by what I escaped, but by what I built. It's about the aroma of my lavender, the texture of the soil, and the genuine kindness of my community. I am no longer the quiet one or the boring daughter. I am Rosemary, the successful farmer, the teacher, the woman who chose peace over blood. I am the stable one, and that's a legacy worth having, debt-free and drama-free. This entire saga was labeled a revenge story, but it wasn't. Revenge is seeking pain for another. This was self-rescue. It was the refusal to participate in my own destruction. The downfall of my family was a side effect, not the main goal. The main goal was always this: the sun, the soil, and the silence. Your greatest revenge isn't what you do to them, it's the beautiful, stable life you create without them. If you've resonated with my quiet revenge, here are 5 core lessons to carry forward. First, silence is power. Don't argue with people who thrive on your reaction. Second, your money is your shield. Financial independence is the ultimate boundary. Third, detachment isn't coldness. It's self-preservation. Fourth, toxic patterns mutate. Even in their downfall, they'll seek new ways to blame you. Fifth, build your own table. Don't waste time waiting for a seat at one that doesn't want you. These truths transformed my life. Your revenge isn't about their misery, it's about your mastery. What small, quiet thing can you do today to move closer to your own financial impregnability? What toxic conversation will you refuse to engage in? The moment you stop reacting, you start winning. If you are struggling with a toxic family member right now, tell me in the comments, what boundary did you set today? Let's build a community of quiet conquerors. Don't let their noise drown out your own beautiful silence. This quiet revenge story is concluded. We covered the theft, the betrayal, the final showdown, and my hard-won peace. But as one story ends, another begins. Next time, we dive into a brand new family fortune, Family Feud series. It's about a seemingly perfect sister who used her charisma to steal an entire legacy. If you think my family was bad, wait until you meet the Carters. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the shocking details.